Hi everyone, I'm Angus. I'm a solutions architect in TrueWatch, and in the next few minutes, I'll be walking you through a very simple but realistic end-to-end SIEM workflow in TrueWatch. Today, we're going to be collecting raw logs, creating a detection rule, validating execution, generating a security event for investigation, and finally, routing an alert to the team for response. For this demo, I'm running a Linux server using OpStack. I'm going to be collecting authentication logs using the TrueWatch data kit, and also building the SIEM rule directly in TrueWatch. The scenario we'll be simulating is basically to simulate multiple failed SSH logins on a Linux host. So this is actually a very common early indicator of brute force or password guessing activities. So before we carry on with the walkthrough, let me just quickly frame the intention of this detection. So the reason this matters is very simple. We basically want to spot any form of brute forcing, password guessing, ideally before a successful login occurs. So once all the conditions are met, the output should be an actionable SIEM item, meaning it should include information like user, host, source IP, attempt counts, all the necessary information that the respective teams, like SecOps, platform teams, they might need in order to act immediately. So for this end-to-end workflow demo, you're going to be seeing three things. Firstly, you're going to be seeing the authentication logs getting ingested in real time into TrueWatch. Second, you'll get to see the rule logic, which is basically to catch 5 failed attempts in 5 minutes by a specific user. And then thereafter, you'll basically be able to see an alert generated with the specific information like user, host, source IP, context, and then a notification that will be sent to the right team channel. So for step 1, what we require is a Linux server. So I've actually used OpStack to create an Ubuntu server over here. I've also enabled SSH and added some test user prior. One very important thing to take note on this Ubuntu host is that SSH authentication events are usually being written to /var/log/alt.log. So depending on the configuration, it might differ. So a key component of this demo is to actually set up the data kit well. Right. So over here, as you can see, I've actually run a systemctl status data kit command to basically check if it's running. So if you do not have the data kit installed, what you can actually do is to run this command over here on the left, as highlighted. Of course, it's very important that after installation, we have to configure the data kit. So what we can do over here is to run this command. So within the configurations, the most important thing that you have to check is to make sure that the URL is configured properly so that you are able to push logs from the server itself to TrueWatch. If you actually need more reference, you can actually reference our YouTube channel, or you can actually go and search docs.truewatch.com/datakit for more information on how to set up a data kit. So after checking, what we can do over here is to basically confirm if the data kit is actually running properly. So what we want to do now is to basically go into the verbose mode. Data kit monitor/v. And it actually goes into the data kit monitor, and then as you can see, if it's running properly, you are actually able to tell that the status are all okay and the input are all 1. The most important thing here that you have to take note is basically this API /v1/write/login. So this basically means that our authentication logs will be pushed successfully to TrueWatch. Do take note that anytime you change the configurations of the data kit, you have to make sure to restart the data kit. And of course, check the status via a systemctl status or using the monitor/v. A very important part about this step when installing the data kit is to also make sure that the source configuration is being done correctly. So that means that we have to configure where the data kit will be pulling the information from before actually pushing it up to TrueWatch. So over here, you can just run this command, this vi command over here. Actually configure the source path. right? So basically a file path over here that I've configured is basically /var/log/off.log. If you take a look, there's actually a lot of sample configuration that you can actually make use of. All you have to do is to just uncomment them. Looks like everything is good. We can get back. So after every single configuration or any updates to a configuration file, it's always important to restart the data kit. So now that we have the data kit set up, let's just go into TrueWatch and to make sure that the data kit and the server is actually connected properly. So over here, you can basically see the dashboard of TrueWatch. Here, I'm going to go into infrastructure. I'm going to click on host. Right, as you can see, the Ubuntu server has connected properly. So for the next step, we will basically be creating the SIEM rule. In order to navigate to that page, basically click on security and detection rule. So right now we are on the manage detection rules page. This is where you can see the overall distribution of our rules by severity and also manage them in a list view. In practice, this page is where teams standardize their detection. You can search by rule name, filter by enablement state or severity, import rules, and also do batch enablement, disablement, export, or apply alert configuration across multiple rules. Over at the top right here, at the library button, you can also take note that we actually offer pre-built SIEM rules that may or may not be applicable to your current requirements and infrastructure. If it does, you can immediately use these rules. So if you actually remember earlier, the whole point of this demo is to actually simulate multiple failed login attempts by a specific user. So over here, what we are going to be doing is to actually go through this SIEM rule and actually take a look on how to configure a SIEM rule that's similar like this. So after clicking into the configuration, as you can see, some of the configuration that you will be configuring is actually the detection type, some of the basic settings that include detection frequency, detection range, security level, describing of the rule, your rule title, rule description, and thereafter labels and alert configurations. So let's go through one by one. So to create a SIEM rule, we'll basically select SIEM over here. So over here for the basic settings, you'll see that there's detection frequency and detection range. These are the two time control that matters the most for reliable detection. Right. So the first one, the detection frequency, what this is that based on your configuration, as you can see for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 6 hours, this is how often the rule will run. So over here, we'll just pick 1 minute. That means that our rule will run every minute. For detection range, this is basically the time window of data that we query each run. So basically, if we were to pick 5 minutes over here, that means that every single time the rule runs, you will actually pick up the last 5 minutes of logs that are actually being pushed to TrueWatch. So next up, what we are going to be doing is to define the detection rules. So the logic is simple. What we will need to do is to pull the Linux authentication logs. We need to match the common failed login patterns like failed password, group them by user, and then afterwards, trigger when the count crosses our threshold, which is 5 failures within 5 minutes. So as you can see over here, I have defined my DQL statement over here to basically look out for this file path and this message, which is failed password. I'll then aggregate accounts by user, and thereafter I'll have my trigger alerts to make sure that when the threshold is being met, which is 5, you will then trigger this rule. So next up, what we are going to be doing is to define the detection rules. So the logic is simple. What we will need to do is to pull the Linux authentication logs. We need to match the common failed login patterns like failed password, group them by user, and then afterwards, trigger when the count crosses our threshold, which is 5 failures within 5 minutes. So as you can see over here, I have defined my DQL statement over here to basically look out for this file path and this message, which is failed password. I'll then aggregate accounts by user, and thereafter I'll have my trigger alerts to make sure that when the threshold is being met, which is 5, it will then trigger this rule. So not to worry if you are unsure on how to create a detection logic. You can actually click here, visit pipeline documentation, and it will then guide you to our TrueWatch documentation, whereby they will provide you with all the information that you require in creating a pipeline. You can also make use of our metric analysis over here. This is how you can create a DQL statement. Right, so as you can see, you can basically click on a couple of metrics, data, etc. Then afterwards, click on here, edit DQL query. And this is basically your DQL statement that which you can use. So after completing your detection rule logic, right? So what we can also configure is your security level, in which this case I've actually picked medium. So depending on the type of rules that you might want to create, you can select them accordingly. Right. So basically, to describe my rule over here, my rule title will be of multiple failed login attempts. And also within the rule description, that's where I'll display the results. And also I try to make it as informative as possible for the respective teams when they are receiving this notification. So if I've actually included things like tactics, technique, sub-techniques, and even references where they can refer to. So after this is where you can actually pick certain tags to basically label this rule over here. And then afterwards, you can also define what kind of alert configuration that you want to tag this SIEM rule to. So over here, I already have some alert strategies that are pre-configured, in which this case I've actually selected one, and then thereafter I can save.